Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Insight. We're very excited to have our first guest conductor of the Masterworks season this week. So I'd like to welcome Thomas Wilkins. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thank you for joining us this week. And where are you joining us from today?
Well, today I'm in Rockford, Illinois, where it snowed last night. So we're here to take care of my in-laws, fix them a Thanksgiving dinner and feed it to them socially distanced. And
great.
Yeah,
so that's great. Good for you. And you'll be arriving in Jacksonville on Monday, correct?
Monday. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us for this week. I think we have a really exciting program that, of course, because of all of the pivots we've had to do this season, we've seen a few iterations of this, but what we landed with is a really exciting pairing of two really diverse pieces, but I think their sound worlds complement each other so well. We have POULENC's Sinfonietta and Tchaikovsky's String Serenade. So let's first let's talk about why these two pieces. What are the individual characters of each broadly, and how do these pieces that are so different, written many decades apart, each being kind of attributed to different, unique musical eras? What is it about them that somehow makes such a good pairing?
Well, I think you're right that it's wonderful that they're written so far apart, and yet we're pretty much operating in the same sound world. Of course, with the addition of winds and brass in the Poulenc, we get a little more richness, but nevertheless, the vibrancy of both of those works, the density of the orchestration of both of those works are terrifically aligned. And I love the fact that both of those works sort of, in a sense, have an outside inspiration, if you will. Tchaikovsky considered Mozart, he called him the Christ of music, and he really wanted to write a piece. He says that he's not so much trying to emulate Mozart, but if he were writing in Mozart's time, this is the piece he would have written. And yet it's all Tchaikovsky's voice. It's all of that. He loves scales. He wrote a beautiful balletic, which he was also well known for. Waltz, and not really waltz, but well, it's not a minuet by any stretch of the imagination. In this serenade, and there is, in the Tchaikovsky, there's always this sort of peripatetic underlying thing going on, in addition to the beautiful melody that's going on. There's always some other inner conversation that's happening, and that adds to the richness of the piece. Poulenc is all over the place with this piece, I used to say to audiences before we would do this piece, don't let your imagination be surprised that you thought you just heard Haydn, or you thought you just heard Mozart even, or you thought you just heard Debussy, or not so much Debussy, but Ravel even, or Fauré. I mean, there is French music, there is dance music, there is comedic music, there is beautiful slow melody that's just genuine and honest. There is music that sounds like Brahms, and in fact there are times when I'm rehearsing it, I'll say, you have to treat this passage as if it's a Brahms symphony. Now, to be fair, he got criticized by that because people couldn't see a real through line to this music, but in its totality, it's just rich with great amount of fun.
Yeah, and this is, that's interesting that you say that. And I think to myself, this is Poulenc's really one significant effort at writing a piece that was symphonic, not meaning for just a symphony orchestra, but a symphony, something structurally similar to that in a way. And I wonder if that not being where he spent most of his compositional life, I wonder if that added to his, whether it be homage or borrowing from the compositional language of these other composers.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
you know, Stravinsky said that good composers borrow, great composers steal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he borrowed in this case, but I think it's possible. I also think it's possible that part of what plays into this is that he was kind of a manic depressive, and so, as in a lot of, not a lot, that's kind of hyperbole, but in much of his music, this manic depressiveness finds itself in the compositional progress and process, so that at one moment he might be in this mood, and the next moment he might be in this mood, and he puts it on paper anyway. And you're right, he was accustomed to writing other kinds of things. I think about Aaron Copland when he gets to his third symphony. The same thing. He made a bunch of money writing ballet music and music for the theater and rodeo and and all these kinds of things, and he felt this outside pressure to write something symphonic and something serious. And this was coming from his colleagues and his friends, and so who knows what the other outside forces are that make its way into how a piece becomes the piece that it is. But I think you're spot on with that.
I think it's one thing that a lot of people may notice is it sounds very Hollywood, and
yeah,
I don't think he's actually taken from Hollywood. I think Hollywood started adapting the language that became prevalent in the a decade or two earlier. Of course, yeah. But this could be straight out of something from the 50s or early 60s Hollywood film score.
I mean the end alone. All of a sudden, you turn the page, and he's in a completely different place, and he just decides, okay, it's time for this piece to end, and I want it to end dramatically and grandly. Yep. And so that's what I'm going to do. And you think to yourself, well, where did this come from? It didn't come from the previous few pages in the score. So and I remember the first time I did it, I thought, this doesn't make any sense. And now, of course, I just feel like it's supposed to be there.
Yeah. Well, in addition to what you mentioned earlier, there being some underlying elements that are very similar compositionally between Tchaikovsky and the POULENC in this, especially texturally. I think one thread that is so evident is there are just so many beautiful sweeping themes in the Sinfonietta, which of course is, the heart of Tchaikovsky in many ways. But I think even though they are definitely their own distinct language.
Right. It's funny. You talk about other outside elements too. I mean, Tchaikovsky was writing two pieces in 1880 in his time period. One was a commission that he thought was just frivolous. That was the 1812 overture. And he says to his big supporter, I'm working on two pieces now. One is just bombastic and loud and will amount to nothing. He would be shocked that the 1812 is played like every 4th of July in America, right?
Yeah.
But the other, he says, this music comes from my soul, and it brings me great joy to write it. And this was from a composer, speaking of outside forces, who often was full of self-doubt. And so, if we could say that maybe there was some desertness, to quote Mahler, with Poulenc in writing this sort of large-scale work, there was all this other historical baggage with Tchaikovsky, and the fact that he was so emotionally committed to this piece and loved it so much. You hear this love in this music, and you hear this self-assuredness in this music, which is terrific.
Absolutely. I mean, the opening statement alone, you hear not a hint of self-doubt. I mean, it's almost confident and just grabs you by the ears right off the bat.
And it's just a scale, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. I mean, how does he take something so simple and make something so convincing out of it?
Yeah,
it's very Mozartian in that way.
Yeah, it is very Mozartian. It's also very Beethovenian. So yes, the opening is a scale, but he, as you said, it's a scale that's full of confidence. And he's so confident in it that he brings it back twice,
Yes.
right?
Bookends.
And yeah, and he brings it back at the end of the first movement. He brings it back at the end of the last movement, and you have a sense that this means something to this man, right? But then also to take that opening, which is also, it's a gesture that leans forward, and it leans into tension, and the minute that he gets there, he relaxes that tension. And then he takes that rhythmic motive and then spins it into a broader, longer melody, which is fantastic. And then I think about in the last movement, where he takes this which is part of a melody, but then he gives it to the cellos and the basses, raises it a step, and the violins are playing what we think is the melody because it comes from a melodic moment earlier in the movement, right? But he spends so much time with that, and it's not the tune, it's just the rhythm of it. And then by the time they unravel this thing at the end of that stepwise motion, the violins take it over. And they still aren't playing it when it was a melody. They're still playing it as it was in the accompaniment. It's just brilliant. Speaking of Mozart, there is a dramatic sort of conversation that's happening. I guess conversation is a good word to use. Even though the low strings aren't conversing with the upper strings, by the time they meet together, they are now sort of agreeing to speak the same language, as it were, which is powerfully dramatic. Certainly, that's Mozartian, because Mozart's instrumental music was often inspired by his opera. And so he would make, you look, especially his concertos, where
the piano concertos for sure
were characters in this storytelling, equal characters in this storytelling. So it's stunning music. And the waltz movement is one of the most beautiful melodies that he's ever written.
You're saying something.
Yeah, right.
So what do you have you found anything new in either of these pieces as you're preparing to, I'm sure you've conducted both of them.
Yeah.
Have you found anything new? How often does that happen, that you discover something new in an old friend when you're preparing it?
I think that's the essence of true friendship. I've been married to my wife for 36 years, and there's still stuff that we're discovering about each other, which is funny and crazy and lovely all at the same time. And that's what happens. When I'm teaching at IU, we drive from Florida there, but because we take our dogs and we have a home in Bloomington, and so we just set up house again, in a different spot. But my wife does all the driving because she gets car sick if she doesn't. And we have a nice pickup truck, and I built myself a desk for the back seat. And I sit in the back seat with one dog, the other dog rides shotgun. And so I study in that time period. And it really I hate driving, so it makes the time go by quickly, because it's like being on a train, really. And one day she heard this sound. I don't know if you can hear it, but she said, looking in the rearview mirror and said, "What are you doing?" And I was erasing my markings from a score that I had conducted several years ago. And I said, "I don't know what I was thinking, but this is not the way this piece goes, And there's just eraser shavings all over the back seat. You live more life, you learn more life, and then that gets poured into your blood, and that blood gets poured into your music. And now you have an even deeper relationship. There's two phases of score study. One is the very structural one, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but the other one is really making the piece your friend. And it's in those deep learnings. And I discovered this time with the Tchaikovsky, and this is now the second time this fall that I have conducted this Tchaikovsky. And yet, looking at the score, to get ready for you guys, I was struck by, I used the word earlier, peripatetic. I was struck by how interesting all of the inner voices are. And I want the audience to pay attention to all the lovely melodies that are floating and all the compelling melodies that are floating on top, but listen to all that other rich stuff that isn't just filler. I think about he takes that and he expands it, and the cellos are going. I mean, it's just remarkable, and in the that's not the right key, by the way. All the other footsteps, balletic footsteps that are happening underneath that long linear melody, again, just rich, just totally rich. And I knew they were there before, but I just saw them in a different light this time around. Probably it's because, when you know something really well, you now can just dig for the stuff that you thought you missed. You can go for all those other tiny details, and that's why we still do it. That's why music stays alive, even 200 years later. I mean, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, and it really takes a piece of great art to continue to provide those opportunities. And
right.
We're excited that you have a couple of these great pieces, and are really looking forward to hearing your ideas on stage.
Well, I found it really funny that when I threw that POULENC out there at you, your reaction was just full of joy. It's like, oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite pieces. And a lot of people don't even know that piece, Mm-hmm. So to get that reaction from you was kind of fun.
I love it very much. Before we go, I have one very important question for you.
Okay.
Is Zagreb's still open in Bloomington? Is that the name of the steakhouse?
Yes, it is, and it is
excellent.
And by the way, so is Mother Bear's, which I had the night we arrived a couple of days ago.
Oh man, that's great. Yeah, I've been there a couple times back in my former life as a pianist, playing for some degree recitals, and
see, that's really the thing.
Always had to go there.
When you went back as an adult, you could actually afford to eat at Zagreb.
right. Yeah.
When you were a student, you probably just walked by and smelled the smells.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a really charming town, and I haven't been in a long time, but that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. We still have, and there's still deer that run all over town. It's not at all strange for me to pull into my driveway and have a deer standing right there in front of my front door.
Yeah. That's great.
It's a different place.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for sharing all of these really powerful and interesting thoughts with us. And I know we're all looking forward to hearing this great program this coming Friday and Saturday. Thank you so much.
And I am too.
It's really a week from now, but by the time this video goes out, it'll be this coming Friday and Saturday. Right. But let me say, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And
thank you.
Family, and
you as well.
Look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay, thanks so much.
Take care.
You too.
Bye now.